On today's World Inside, Germany's Christian Democratic Union, the winner of Sunday's election, with a surge for far-right party AfD and a rejection of outgoing Chancellor Olaf Scholz's leadership. So what does the political change mean for Germany? What happens next?
Hello and welcome to World Inside, a live edition of the program coming to you from Beijing. I'm Tian Wei. We begin today's program with the Germany election. Over 28% of Sunday's vote went to Germany's conservative bloc, the Christian Democratic Union and the Christian Social Union. They have taken the lead in the country's 2025 federal election. Preliminary results have already shown. Meanwhile, the Anti-Immigration Alternative for Germany Party, or AfD, garnered a record vote of over 20%. Many analysts believe the far right is gaining popularity among German voters. So, what do the election results mean for Germany, both politically and economically, and also for the continent of Europe? Any likely shift in German policy on the European Union, China, and the rest of the world? Let's loop in our panelists. Joining us in Berlin, Oliver Hottenmoller, who is the Vice President of the Halle Institute for Economic Research. Also in Berlin, Ulrich Bruckner, Jean Monnet Professor for European Studies with Stanford University. In Beijing, Cui Hongjian, Professor with the Academy of Regional and Global Governance, Beijing Foreign Studies University. And last but not least, in Beijing, in the studio with me, Einar Tangen, Senior Fellow at the Taihe Institute and Chairman of the Asia Narratives. Now, let's take a look at the first most important question to tackle. Is German politics turning right, overall speaking? Mr. Hottenmoller.
Yes, hello. Thank you for having me.
Good to see you.
I think this is somehow a normalization. And if you look at election results in other European countries or in the US, then we have seen this move before, that there are populist parties on the rise. That is not a special German feature. We just see somehow the normalization of Germany compared to other Western countries, I think.
Well, Ulrich, the AfD, the Conservative Party on the very right, far right, for the very first time since the Second World War has garnered the most votes. What do you make of this fact? Is German politics really turning much more to the right, or not necessarily?
Well, if you ask me as a citizen of Germany, it makes me sick to sit here and to talk about a result in my country that questions all the core principles and values and beliefs that I grew up with. If you ask me as a political analyst, I could say something similar like my distinguished colleague from the Halle Institute and say, well, it's not so bad. Other countries suffer much more from populist movements. But I would be very careful in using terms like normalization when we speak of something that is, according to Donald Trump, a trend of common sense. If common sense is translated as racist and xenophobic and anti-Semitic and disruptive in the sense that we question the functioning of our institutional system, then no, this has nothing to do with normalization. But when we look at the longer development, then we see also a development in the last 25 years in which Germany has become much more pluralist, cosmopolitan, diverse, and everything that people on the extreme right end question, and therefore a swing to the center is a form of normalization.
I can see you're very passionate, certainly, about the results, even as an analyst. What about the other two? We have Einar, originally coming from the United States, but certainly not necessarily a representative of the current administration, but also Professor Cui, who is based here in China, observing the politics of on the European continent. What the two of you make of this result? Einar, very briefly.
Well, I don't see it as normalization, but I do see it as a kind of new normal. Europe is not in the competitive position it was before, and you're seeing people react to it. You had a series of natural disasters, including that massive flood. You had the pandemic, and now you have this realization that Germany is not in the driver's seat in terms of technology and manufacturing. So they're having to readjust, and of course that results in defensive behavior.
Some of the issues you just mentioned, we're going to talk and tackle a little bit later. But Hong Jian, what is your take as a Chinese analyst?
I'm sorry, I'm not so optimistic about the election like our German guests, because also yes, it looks like CDU won this election as number one, but it has been second worst result since last decades. And also SPD, undoubtedly worst result since end of World War II. And also on policy, yes, CDU is trying to look like traditional central right party. But if we look at the policy, especially on immigration, it has going to more and more close to the AfD. On all of these are some very important policy issues.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that certainly now the German politics become more and more right.
What I can say now is I'm glad that the final result have already come out, so we don't have to debate about these different political parties. But what we are facing now is, what about that coalition government? We see the leading bloc has been reluctant to form a coalition government with AfD, which is the far right. So what is the prospect of this coalition government, given the urgency of a government that needs to churn out important policies ASAP? Ulrich, as an analyst.
Well, as an analyst, it's not very promising, because the government, from my perspective, without any necessity, put itself in a position to meet expectations they can practically not meet. Like announcing that there would be a massive deportation of illegal migrants is practically not feasible. So they will underperform, and that will fire back. Everything else they have to address is bloody expensive, starting from climate change policies, from modernization, gaining competitiveness, lowering taxes, investing massively in strategic autonomy from the United States. All of this comes with a super big price tag. And to find resources in times in which we also tied our hands with a debt break on a constitutional level is squaring the circle. So it doesn't look very promising how much a new government can practically deliver.
Oliver, you have been doing research about the economic issues in Germany for a long time. Tell me more, because this is important. What kinds of coalition government will it be? Will it be the leading party together with two other partners, or one partner? That's an interesting question. Secondly, there is also the far left, which is called the Left Party, and also the far right, the AfD. Both of them together would form 1/3 of the parliamentary seats, which is the number crucial for blocking any specific decisions about the change of the constitution. As Ulrich just earlier mentioned, 0.35% of the debt break vis-a-vis GDP has been the traditional numbers. If that needs to be changed, infrastructure investment, or invest more into the defense system or interaction with NATO, all of this needs that change. So what about these different facts? What does that mean to this coalition government, forming of this coalition government?
Yeah, we as economists distinguish between long-term growth perspectives and the business cycle fluctuations. And the long-term growth perspectives of Germany are rather weak. The main reasons are demography, the energy transition, and the lack in digitization. So these are three major challenges. And in the short-term perspective, from a business cycle perspective, there's economic policy uncertainty that is really high in Germany on a level that has never been seen before. And this is something that the new coalition government can potentially change. So given the current knowledge that we have about the outcome of the election, we will have a new government coalition consisting of 2 parties instead of 3.
Yeah, no.
So there is a chance that they have more luck in finding solutions for problems that have a longer duration, a longer half-life.
Despite the fact that Mr. Merz, who is now the leading politician of the winning political bloc, has earlier vowed not to form any kinds of cooperation coalition government with AfD.
Yeah, so this is ruled out, and I mean there's a majority of the Conservative Party, the CDU, and the Social Democrats, the SPD, and I think those 2 parties will form the next government.
Very interesting. Now, there are 2 things. One is whether a coalition government will be formed on time. The other is what will be the results of policies coming out of this future-to-be coalition government. So, but the question whether it will be formed on time is also an interesting one, given the fact that Mr. Scholz, the current chancellor, will be, staying in the office until the coalition government is being formed. Ulrike, do you see a timeline? Do you think that can be done within 4 weeks or even 8 weeks?
Well, what we heard from Friedrich Merz, who prepared way better in advance than what we have experienced in previous governments, which sometimes took much longer than any other forming of a coalition in the past. He announced that by mid-April, which in Germany is Easter, we will see a government in place, and all the internal conflicts about personnel and who's going to get what kind of important ministries and how specific will be the coalition agreement, because Germany is so rule-based that they even sign contracts like to-do lists that they can be used by research institutes or by the media to check how much of the promises have been met and what has not been opened as a file. So there is a lot that you can compare the lip services in the election campaign with what they actually promised to do. And so this might take shorter this time because they are aware of the risk of underperforming, and then this could lead to a slippery slope in which we have again snap elections, and then the outcome will be much worse than this one.
Einar, is the time on the side of Germany now?
No, it isn't. There's obviously the domestic issues that need to be addressed. Germans want inflation. They want to see a growth pattern. As my colleague has said, this is all it's going to take is a tremendous amount of money. And then you have the international situation with Donald Trump.
That's kind of interesting, isn't it, Oliver? Because earlier we have seen German politicians' complaints of interference of internal affairs by the current Trump administration, whether it's the president or vice president or a leading figure of the government such as Elon Musk. And now we see the AfD, which the latter pretty much verbally already supported, has become the second largest. So what does that mean for German politics with the shadow of Washington hanging over there, this time quite interestingly? Oliver, can you hear me?
I'm sorry, I have a technical issue here. Just wait a second, please.
All right, then I'll go to Ulrich for the same question, if you can, sir.
Well, the shadow of the United States as a term is already like a historical change. We used to define ourselves based on we are committed to European integration and to transatlantic relations, and now we are discussing a declaration of independence towards the United States to get our act together that strategic autonomy is not just a term, because we are treated as if we are enemies. And when you look at the Security Council resolution about Ukraine, China joined the European position on explicitly mentioning the territorial integrity of sovereign states, while the United States is supporting the Russian one. This is the situation in which we currently are, which practically means, given what has been discussed at the Munich Security Conference, NATO is dead, because the promise of deterrence, that an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us, is apparently, from the perspective of J.D. Vance, the vice president, not worth being defended, because the values and principles that Europeans stand for is not what the United States think the Western world is. So the rift has never been more serious, and the consequences are dramatic.
Mr. Cui, tell us more about how do you, far from Berlin though, reading the tea leaves?
Yes, indeed. Now I think it's a very difficult situation for Berlin and for its policy makers. So as we know, Mr. Merz regarded its very difficult mission, not only just to find out the approach to help recovery of the German economy. I think the most important thing now is comparing with some other European countries and also the allies of the United States. As we know, Germany depends so much on the United States, not only economic and trade, and especially security. Mm-hmm. So I think now it's time for Germany to make some very, very critical decision. Now it looks like once the new government led by Mr. Merz and his party, it will show some tougher attitude towards the relations with the United States in the form of building up a kind of a European military force, and also to give some maybe tit for tat retaliation measures on these tariffs pressures from Washington. But of course, now I think the most important thing for Germany is how could Mr. Merz and his government try to get perhaps a new type of cooperation with some other European countries, especially France, the UK, and some other. I think it would be a key point for Berlin to give a more positive response.
If a coalition government can be formed on time, Oliver, your thoughts on their priorities in terms of interactions with the rest of the world, given the fact that it is quite chaotic to begin with?
It's very important that the European Union is speaking with one voice here in international cooperations. And this is, of course, a number one issue for the new German government to find a way to communicate again with France. So the relationship between the current chancellor, still Olaf Scholz, and the French government was, let's say, difficult. And this, of course, was a problem in all parts of the European Union, and this needs to change. And this is something that Mr. Merz always said in his election campaign, that he wants to improve the relationships within the European Union, and this will be very important for speaking again with one voice in negotiations with Russia, with China, with the US, and so on.
Einar, how do you see this latest Ukraine-Russia issue and the urgency of the possible to be a coalition government in Germany? We understand that now Washington is going ahead with Moscow and also with talks with Ukrainian leader without the participation of European leaders. Of course, the latter protest against that.
Well, I think the important thing to note is that China is actually trying to support the EU in this, and said that it needs to be at the table, that you cannot exclude people. You can't exclude Ukraine. I mean, it's as silly as trying to exclude Russia from the peace process. How can you possibly do that? All the parties need to be there, and there needs to be significant guarantees. In the past, the Europeans were not genuine. Both Merkel and Hollande admitted that they signed on to peace agreements with Russia, which were, in fact, they had no intention of carrying through. They were just simply looking for more time to rearm Ukraine. So whatever settlement there is out there is going to have to take a new group of guarantors that could be India, also in process from the Middle East.
Well, Ulrich, to you, what likely to be the first test of this coalition government, if there is going to be one on time? Do you see the Russian-Ukraine crisis, or do you see the debt break, or do you see immigration issue, or do you see infrastructure investment, or do you see the efficiency to begin with to cut the bureaucracies within the government? What are likely to be the barometer that you think the public and also the business community are going to watch very closely?
Well, as you listed, all of them are super sensitive for public opinion and also how Germany positions itself. And we learned in recent history that if you have too many headlines, people get confused. So we tend to put one crisis at the center of everything and then the next one is following. You never know. And I don't think that the government is in a luxurious position to form its own agenda. I think the agenda will form itself and they have to react. And we have already a pretty broad scope. So even if the government manages to have a good start and to form a coalition on time and to be ready by Easter and then to openly address what they think is the top priority, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are allowed to follow their own agenda, because all previous governments were forced to react to something that we didn't even see coming. Let it be the financial crisis or the pandemic or Brexit or whatever it was.
Oliver, if you look at the importance of the German economy, probably nothing else can be compared to that in terms of long-term Germany's prosperity and its importance both on the European continent and worldwide. But there is a structural difference, let's say Germany now compared to 15 years ago. Mainly Germany has been exporting to the United States and to China, but the latter two has been changing United States in terms of government policies with the tariffs and the things goes on from the Trump administration. That's very much likely to be a huge structural change. To China has been changing its position on the global supply chain. It's been coming to the upper ladder of the global supply chain, very different from earlier times. We see some cooperation between China and Germany. So do you see that the coalition to be government in Germany will be sensitive enough and knowledgeable enough and urgency centered in terms of its policies for its economic long-term sustainability?
So I think the situation is unprecedented. It's not easy to find a blueprint for what is now the right thing to do. The most important issue for the new government will be to come up with a credible plan for the next years. So as I said before, uncertainty is elevated. That is one of the major issues. So people do not invest because of uncertainty. People do not consume because of uncertainty. And the new government has to come up with a credible plan what to do in the next years to come. And this will be extremely difficult because Friedrich Merz promised a change in economic policy. He promised a change in security policy. But one of the two coalition partners will be the governing party from the past. So it's very difficult to see how they will come up in a short amount of time with a credible plan. But that's the most important thing, I think.
Ulrich, we have been hearing quotes out of media reports from the leading German business communities. You know, almost every one of them say, enough is enough, the talks. Enough is enough, the debates. We got very clear what the problems are. Now we need the government to solve this problem, or at least not to pull us back from solving these problems. Now, Ulrich, do you see this coalition government to be likely to be equipped both with the guts and the vision and also likely with the tools to do that? Stop talking, do something.
Well, I think this is a massive simplification, and I understand the lobbying interest behind it. But no matter who was in power in the last years would have faced major challenges and would be guilty of underperforming. This is not a question for the Ampel coalition or for more years of Merkel. if you face a perfect storm, like the pandemic consequences, Russia's invasion to Ukraine, a disruption in the relationship with the United States and everything else it comes with, and rising emerging markets that perform better than Germany, that is still the third largest economy in the world, although on a world map, you hardly find the country because it's so small. So none of this is a given that it will continue, but fixing everything on the spot is an overestimation what a government can possibly do.
The German economy has been a central topic, in fact, Hong Jian, among the Chinese scholars who are studying Germany. What is your take about the possible potential China is looking for in Germany in cooperation and also in seeing this great economic power rise and continue to rise?
You also Mr. Merz should its tactic try to have this balance of policies towards China. On one hand, that yes, there are two big, common requirements from both two countries to continue and also even increase their cooperation in economic and trade and or even industry. But at the same time, as we know, Merz and some other European politicians, they try to also follow a kind of tougher, attitude towards China on some security and foreign policy issue. But now I think that in the wake of the huge change in the relations between Germany and the United States, I think that there are a lot of a window of opportunity for Mr. Merz to rethink about the common values or common interests in the relations with China. So certainly, I think that not only in traditional manufacturing and also this AI and also green economy could be very, very important and also mutual beneficial cooperation for both the countries.
Now, from the talk that we're having today, until a coalition government should be formed, some suggest 4 weeks top. Others suggest, at least they can have 8 weeks if it's difficult. But anyway, what do you think can be the signs for all of us, both within Germany and outside, to understand better whether the coalition government to be have the power and the capabilities to deal with what they're facing with or they're likely to face with? Everyone will have one sentence, I guess. Only the time is enough for one sentence. Let's go to Ulrich.
Well, there is no simple answer to this. The government isn't popular. Friedrich Merz is not the savior of the country, so his starting condition is pretty bad. And if he impresses us positively that he gets things done, good, but the expectations are not very bright.
All right, Einar?
I think Germany has to come to the realization that it needs to build on the existing economy, including China, rather than trying to say that it's going to stop it. It's like the tide.
All right. Hong Jian?
So now the political game in Germany is over, but now, of course, the focus would be how could these government and also main parties to have a game on policies, especially how could they try to get some more cooperative attitude towards China.
Oliver, last but not least.
Yeah, I'm not that pessimistic. There is a high pressure and there will be new people at the table in the government. So there is a change in the personnel, and therefore there is a realistic chance that things are going to improve also because of the very high pressure. The probability is not 100%, I agree.
We are running out of time, and that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight, check out our YouTube channel, follow us on X and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for being with us. Bye for now, and thank you for all of you for participating in this discussion.